Lydia's whole being jolted as she watched Beetlejuice get slammed against the glass of the tank. The sound of his body being dragged against the glass was a loud, drawn-out squeak. Beetlejuice's pleading eyes caught her attention, and he mouthed the words, "Help me," as bubbles floated silently up and out of his mouth. The audience suddenly cheered. Lydia didn't hesitate for a moment. She willed the ball to shatter the barrier and free Beetlejuice from his aquatic prison, and with a deep breath, she grabbed the last ball and hurled it with all her might towards the booth. The sound of the glass breaking echoed through the park, followed by a rush of water gushing out from the tank. As the water cleared, Lydia's eyes widened in horror as she saw the grotesque creature wriggling on the ground, belching and spewing water. Disgusted, she covered her mouth with her hand, trying her best not to gag. But suddenly, with a forceful burst of water, Beetlejuice came flying out and slammed onto the ground in front of her. He struggled to stand up, his drenched clothes clinging to his body like a second skin. He shook himself off like a dog after a bath, water spraying everywhere, but not a drop landed on her. Then, to Lydia's surprise, he yelled over his shoulder,
"Buy me dinner first, you cad!"
and marched off without waiting for Lydia to follow. Lydia stared after him, incredulous.
"Ungrateful ass," she muttered under her breath. "Just saved a sorry ass again, and he can't even say thank you?"
She jogged to catch up with him, feeling a mix of irritation and curiosity.
"Where are you going?"
she asked, falling into step beside him. Beetlejuice just looked at her as if she were stupid.
"Where the Neitherworlders are,"
he replied, his tone cryptic. Lydia rolled her eyes.
"Right. And here I thought we were done with your mysterious, 'I'm so suave' act. You're really not as scary as you used to be, you know."
Beetlejuice just smirked, not bothering to respond as he continued toward some unknown destination. Lydia sighed and followed, resigned to the fact that she'd never get a straight answer out of him.
"I seem to remember you being a lot taller, too," she taunted.
The poltergeist scoffed.
"I don't know how that's possible, since you haven't grown a whisker taller since last I saw you, Napoleon."
There was a bark of laughter, but it took Lydia a second before realizing the sound had come from her. And even though she tried to disguise it by coughing and clearing her throat, the smug smile on the ghost's face said she had fooled no one. She decided it was best to keep quiet and observe. Lydia followed Beetlejuice through the theme park, their footsteps echoing through the mostly empty walkways. The sounds of laughter and the bustling of crowds playing faded as they left the games section behind and joined a new crowd, their faces as bland as when she had first arrived, and giving the place an eerie feel. As they passed the freak show, Lydia shuddered at the twisted creatures inside their cages. She wondered again where Beetlejuice was going, but decided not to ask. Soon they arrived at the largest and weirdest circus tent Lydia had ever seen. It was like a big top out of a nightmare, with twisted shapes and grotesque decorations. She couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding as they approached the entrance. Oddly enough, she stepped closer to her guide, who side-eyed her the moment she did.
"Don't worry, babes. Your knight in Grammy armor will protect ya,"
he snickered and then snorted.
"Seriously, though, don't touch anyone or anything while we're in there."
"In there?"
she asked, nodding up at the ominous structure that loomed ever closer.
"Yeah, just gotta have a chat with an old pal."
"Who?"
Beetlejuice sneered.
"The Ringleader."
Two clowns with small baseball bats in their hands hung from their necks at the entrance, eyeing Beetlejuice warily.
"Scuzzo, fuzzo, how's it hanging?"
He cackled and sauntered past them, and they let him through without a word. Lydia followed close behind, confident they wouldn't notice her presence, but still nervous about the oppressive feeling growing around her. As they entered the tent, Lydia's nose was assaulted by the smell of musty fabric and cheap perfume. The inside was just as creepy as the outside, with dim lighting and strange decorations adorning every corner. The tent was filled with creepy creatures and oddities, all on display. The ringleader stood tall and regal, with a top hat perched atop his head, and a long black cloak flowing behind him. His eyes were black voids. He had a thin mustache above a cruel, upturned mouth that curled into a sneer at the corners. Lydia couldn't help but feel uneasy in his presence, certain she was being judged and found wanting, even though she knew he couldn't see her. Despite his intimidating demeanor, he seemed to exude a sense of charisma and confidence, commanding the attention of everyone in the tent. Lydia could see that he was the kind of person who was used to getting his way, accustomed to being in control of every situation. She wondered what kind of power he wielded behind the scenes of this strange circus.
My, Mr. Juice.
The ringleader's voice was pitched so high that Lydia wondered if he'd inhaled helium. She couldn't help it. She snorted and laughed.
I know, right?
Beetlejuice muttered as he turned his head to her and snorted too.
Ahem.
The tall man did not look impressed.
I was going to send for you eventually.
Yeah,
Beetlejuice drawled.
give or take a millennium. Come on, man.
He implored as he threw up his hands.
It's been like half a century already. Let me go.
Has not and will not.
The ringleader replied with an evil smile.
However,
He twirled his mustache.
I am quite grateful for whatever you've been doing here. Ticket sales have skyrocketed. Somehow,
He grinned and narrowed his eyes.
you've brought back some life to my beloved park.
He stepped closer and tilted his head.
How did you do it?
He asked with a curious lilt. Lydia instinctively latched onto Beetlejuice's sleeve. The poltergeist didn't even flinch, but he winked at the ringleader and gave him an apologetic smile.
You know better than to ask a magician how he does his tricks. But seeing as you're so grateful and all, how about you shorten my sentence a little bit, eh?
The ringleader chuckled.
Always negotiating, but the terms have been set. You know I don't make the rules.
Except we both know you kinda do.
Beetlejuice pointed out with a knowing smirk.
I can...
He trailed off and locked eyes with Lydia for a moment before grinning and declaring,
For the right price, I can spice things up a little more. As much as you want.
Lydia's eyes widened.
You mother...
Now that
Said the ringleader with an enthusiastic clap.
is something I'm interested in.
He tapped his chin with a long nail and hummed.
Add your spice, as you say, to the whole of the park by tea time tomorrow. And you can be free as a crow.
That's not enough time.
Beetlejuice cried with outrage. The ringleader polished his nails on his cloak and then gave him a pointed look.
There is still the other way you can get scot-free.
The room grew cooler by several degrees, and Lydia realized the oppressive energy came from Beetlejuice at that moment. He gave the ringleader a hooded glare that made Lydia shiver.
Never.
He growled out. The ringleader cackled.
I thought not.
This was the fear she had felt that night she called for his help. And in that moment, she had to finally concede that, yes, Beetlejuice had helped. True, the poltergeist's methods had been questionable, but the result had saved her godparents, and she never came through on her end. Whatever this other way was, it seemed serious enough. After all, if he wanted his freedom so badly, she was sure Beetlejuice would do just about anything. He'd already proven that once.
I can do it.
She whispered close to his ear, and did he shudder just now? He turned his head, which brought their faces so close, and gazed into her eyes.
What the blazes are you looking at, Juice?
The chipmunk-like voice broke the moment.
Just thinking.
He replied, smiling while still staring down Lydia without so much as a blink.
And what are you thinking?
The ringleader rolled his eyes with exasperation. Beetlejuice turned back to look at the man who held his freedom.
That this place needs a little shaking up.
He stuck out his hand.
Clean your doilies and bring out your best china, pal. I take my tea with 12 Splendas, whipped cream, and a splash of freedom.
The ringleader beamed, reminding Lydia of a cat certain they'd cornered a canary.
Splendid.
And they shook on it. Thank you for listening. You can find the written version of this story by clicking the link in the description. Please like and subscribe for more. And let me know what you think of this story.